This is Bonnie Bucqueroux, and as you can see, I'm in the great outdoors. In last week's lecture, I had encouraged you that when you needed a refresher, step outside for 10 minutes and get back to nature, because it often sort of resets our computer and reboots us and gives us a fresh look at the world and sparks some of that creativity. So I've done some of the same thing, as you can see. This week, we are going to be talking about organizational basics and creative interpretation. And so let's start with a bit about the organizational basics. How do people organize themselves when the work that they're doing is going to be creative work? How does that differ? We know what it looks like on the assembly line, where you stood in one place and you went ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching as the thing went by you on the assembly line, because all of the tasks were routinized and automated, and they were the kinds of things that just were repetitive. You just simply had to complete the task. One was put in front of you and you got it done. It's not the same way with creative work. The creative work offers a number of different challenges, especially to supervisors and managers. How do you get people to perform at their best? How do you get them to be really creative and give you the top quality of the work that you need? If we look at how the organizational structure for creative work, I think what we look at is, the top role of the boss or the leader or the project manager. That person has specific tasks related to getting that creative work done. And the first one is basically just sort of organizing the work, telling people what it is that they're there to accomplish, understanding the boundaries and the parameters, giving them some sense of what the budget will allow, laying out a timeline, and then inspiring and monitoring the people who are actually doing the different tasks so that they can be in charge of completing the work and making sure that it happens on deadline and within budget, which isn't always easy sometimes with creative work, because sometimes too, as we see in many organizations, the expectations change over time, or new things happen, or barriers appear, or problems occur, and you have to be very flexible to be able to sort of go with the flow. We should probably look also at how the staff is organized. If you're talking about a large organization that has a lot of people on staff, they can afford to organize people by function, where either one person or a team of people complete certain parts of the task. Often at the sort of apex of all of this are the writers, the people who organize the work in words so that you can follow along what's going to happen. There are also the writers whose job it is to come up with sort of the catchy slogan, or the catchphrase, or put the words in an engaging way that really tell the story. So that's one group, are the sort of word people. In addition to that, depending on the task at hand, you might have photographers who take the still images. You might have videographers who are in charge of doing the video. If it's a project at an ad agency, you have a film crew, a video crew that's going to go out and they're going to get the images, the video images for the ad that you're creating. Or if it's at a news organization, maybe you want to cover this aspect of the story. The president's giving a speech and you send somebody out with the video camera to make sure that they get the president on video. You might have somebody who does just audio. NPR does wonderful audio stories. Or maybe you send somebody to capture the podcast, and you need to be able to have the podcast as part of the package that your public relations agency is putting together, that they're going to try to place with the media. It could be that you have the separate designer, the person who is going to do the layout and design. If it's a brochure, if it's a magazine layout, if it's the newspaper, you've got the design crew who gets the information and puts it into the design package, or creates the design package for you. If it's a one-off project, then you have to create the design from scratch. There's also potentially the animator. Maybe nowadays you're going to have a flash animation in your project, or you're going to use HTML5 with a program like Canvas to create some sort of animation for your project, especially for an online one. You may need a web or a tech person. Somebody who's familiar with WordPress, or who can do Dreamweaver, or who can do HTML5 or jQuery or JavaScript, or all of those other back-end programmings. Maybe they're going to do a custom theme for you. Then you also are going to need your copy editors and your proofreaders who make sure that all of the stuff says what it's supposed to say, that there isn't an apostrophe in the wrong place, or that you violated some sort of style requirement where do you use the comma, do you not use the comma, what do you use, how do you put a date in there, do you say 8 a.m. or do you say 8:00 a.m. Those are all the things that people have to check at the end. So there's a lot of different functions in putting any kind of creative task into a package package that you're going to produce. And organizations that have a large number of people on staff may be able to just assign individuals or actual whole teams to each one of those separate functions. So they need to be able to organize themselves so that they have that capacity to do so. Now, one of the big differences nowadays, of course, is that if we look at public relations as a field, for example, some of these packages that you're producing may be for internal consumption only. We have internal PR that's done in large corporations. There's lots of jobs there where your job is to create the newsletter, or maybe it's a weekly e-newsletter that you send to your employees. Maybe you're doing employee training. Each new employee, if you've got thousands of employees, each one of them has to be trained. There's not much point in assigning one person to do that or holding a bunch of training sessions. Maybe your communications team has to come up with a creative way to put together either an online package or maybe a video package to train new employees, and there are plenty of creative processes that take place within those kinds of assignments. There's also external public relations, where you're putting together packages that you're trying to place with others. You're the one doing the PR, news releases. You're the ones who are doing the video packages that you give to the TV stations and say, when you're doing something about this new electric car, here's some great video and a little stand-up with one of our engineers that you may want to drop into your package. So the local reporter, all they have to do is go to the local showroom, stand in front of the new electric car, say, isn't this wonderful? And then they have the footage to drop in that the PR person back at the auto company has provided, the team has provided, that shows them the interview with the engineer and explains all the dynamics. Maybe it's got a really nice animation that shows how the new engine was developed, the new hybrid engine was developed. Those are the kinds of things that creative people at different corporations get to do for external PR nowadays. There's a separate sort of category that you can also become involved in, which is crisis communication. Something goes wrong. Maybe those new cars that you just created, those hybrid cars, maybe they have a little bit of a problem, and maybe a engine catches on fire or a wheel falls off and you've got to recall some of them. And people start to get nervous. Well, how big is the problem? Is my car safe? So you need to have somebody who can, in the PR department, pull together a team and very quickly deal with whatever the crisis is. And that can mean pulling together the people that do all those separate functions and getting them to work in crisis mode. Or it may mean that in larger corporations, they outsource some of that. They hire a separate PR agency, an outside agency. So there are jobs in that field as well, where you might be part of the team in an outside agency that's hired to do special projects. Maybe because it's a large project and they want to have a team that has specific talents involved, or maybe it's because it's crisis communication. So I have these same kinds of creative groups within news organizations. They're the ones who do the enterprise stories. They put together a team and they decide, we're going to do something special, and what is the look of the long-term unemployed in our community? How has that changed over the years? Are there now white-collar people in the suburbs who are unemployed? We've been focusing on maybe the people displaced from manufacturing jobs. But now in this new economic crisis, we know that we should be doing packages of stories on people in the suburbs who are also finding themselves long-term unemployed. And it means that you have to put together a whole creative package about that, and you have to go again and see what are all the functions in the team to put together a creative package of materials on a story like that. So there are these organizational challenges within news organizations, public relations agencies, advertising agencies, communications departments within corporations and within nonprofit organizations, all of which are looking at how do they produce these kinds of creative materials for the different purposes that they have to fulfill. Next topic to talk about a little bit with organizational structure is leadership. The tone starts at the top. The kind of organization, one of us, it's the old blind beggars can't be choosers. Getting that first job out of college sometimes means getting the job you can get and not the ideal job you want. But the challenge is also realizing that different people flourish in different kinds of environments. And managing creative people, there's a lot of confusion, I think, still in the work world. That a lot of people think that you sort of follow the old-fashioned model of the assembly line. You try to limit the person's breaks and make sure they don't spend too long at lunch. And if they're sitting at their desk and they don't seem to be doing anything, then they must be wasting my dollars. Well, maybe they're thinking up the next great idea that's going to make you $1 million. So part of the challenge is trying to find an organizational structure that works well for managing creative people. More and more, the research is showing that pressuring creative people with unrealistic deadlines deadlines or constantly threatening them with money or budgets is really not a good way to get work out of people. But there are plenty of organizations that are still what we call fear-based, where the leadership at the top is the old thing, we have a new sales contest going, you know, sell this car or lose your job, that kind of thing. I mean, where they put a lot of pressure on the employee to perform. There are other environments that are much more nurturing and collaborative, and that's more or less the new way of doing business. However, what happens sometimes with organizations is that when times get tough, people get nervous. And all of a sudden they switch from being a collaborative environment that may nurture creativity to a competitive environment where everybody is afraid of losing their job. Part of your challenge, if you have the luxury of having more than one job you think you might get, is making sure that the climate in the organization you go to work for is likely to fit with who you are and how you function best in terms of creativity. I'm one of those people that's kind of got a tough skin. People can yell at me, they can do kinds of things, and I'm not going to be the one that bursts into tears. I'm going to be the one that just kind of goes, boy, what a jerk. Other people take that and internalize it, and it really harms them, and it can do damage to them over time. So I'm suggesting to you that when you look at the organizational culture of the place that you're going to work, realize that if you're a creative person, you need to know who you are and what brings out the best in you. You want to succeed in any job you go into. And if you go into a culture that's unlikely to allow you to succeed, then you're not doing them or yourself any favor. So realize who you are and what kind of organizational culture it's going to take for you to do your best and to flourish. At the end of the day, one of your main jobs is to please the boss. Getting the task done, doing quality work, all of that matters, but if your boss doesn't see you as a valuable member of the team or the person who was responsible for that wonderful product at the end of the day, you harm yourself. So part of the challenge is to please the boss. Well, who's your boss? If you're a freelancer, you have new bosses all the time, and it's a different cast of characters almost every day that you might have to please. Within any organization, I heard great advice many years ago. It said, the boss is the person who not only gives you assignments and gives you that job performance, but it's the person who can give you the raise. The person who can actually say, okay, you're worth 20% more next year than you are this year. Wouldn't that be wonderful to get a 20% raise? So identify those people and find out what it is that they need from you. I can tell you that for creative people, one of the things that you can do for your boss is to give them the security that you can produce quality work on deadline within budget and make them happy, that you're going to make their life easy, that you're the problem solver that's come in and going to be able to do the job that makes them shine, because making your boss shine is ultimately what's going to help you succeed. So in that organizational structure, whether you're the freelancer or whether you are the employee, always figure out who your boss is and make sure that you can develop that relationship of trust over time. I think trust is an integral factor in allowing creative people to succeed, and all too often I'm not sure that we pay attention to that when we talk about some of the organizational basics. But it really matters in creative work.